I guess partly to do with growing up here in Singapore. Like I've always been interested in local history, and I think from maybe 17, 18 onwards, sort of aware that there was a difference between the mainstream historical narrative and sort of the alternative versions of it, you know. And I was always interested in exploring or learning more about that difference. And this book was, in a way, a chance for me to do that, to kind of read, explore, research that difference, and hopefully at the end of it to tell an interesting story through a comic about that difference. From the get-go, the idea was always to try to tell Singapore history through a fictional comics history. That was sort of the kernel of the idea of the book, the formal approach to telling the story. So it was always going to be some sort of comic, you know. Initially, it wasn't going to be entirely in comic form. They're going to be essays together with images. But once I started doing it, I realized it needed to be entirely in comics to be, well, in order for the reader to kind of read it in a more linear fashion, you know. Because I had realized that books, there were essays plus images, you know, that I own, I tended to read in a very piecemeal fashion. I would kind of dip through it like any coffee table book, you know, that format. So I needed to change the format so that it would be read in a more linear way. So I mean, I don't think the book might never have been started or finished without a publisher involved, because I actually had the idea for the book several years before that, but I couldn't quite imagine who would be willing to publish it. Like, because it was about Singapore history, I couldn't imagine an American publisher being interested. And locally, you know, very few people would like pay any kind of money up front for you to do a project like this. So what happened was that the Epigram had received a pretty big grant from the MDA, right, to do a series of graphic novels. So Edmund Wee, the publisher, had approached a few of us local artists to create five comics for them, having gotten the grant. And that's when I thought it would be a good fit between the idea I had and sort of what the grant was for, which is local comics, local content. For me personally, one of the things that always strikes me is when people come up to me and tell me that kids, their children as young as 10 or 12 have been reading it, and, you know, not necessarily getting the whole thing, but at least seeing enough there that they enjoy reading it. They'll go back to it, they'll like copy drawings, you know. I think that part was surprising, because in my mind, the book was pitched at a slightly older audience, maybe 15, 16 onwards. So to hear that kids 10 or 12 are reading it, that's probably one of the most satisfying things that I've encountered so far. You know, it doesn't come just from face-to-face meetings. It also comes from like emails and I guess even reviews of your work. You know, so you kind of get an idea of what people see in the work, and sometimes you agree with it, sometimes you disagree, but you try to take on board what you feel are valid criticisms and try to improve on those things. You know, other things you can read and you know, it doesn't make any sense at all. And it's a whole different ideology or context that you can maybe ignore for the present, and you know, and maybe come back to it later and see whether it makes any sense to you at a later stage in the career. But yeah, you always get positive and negative feedback, and you're trying to figure out what's valid for you at that point in time, I think.